Hi, I'm Michelle. Welcome to my quilting beehive. Today I'm going to show you a piece that we use in many quilts, a block called the V-block or 2 peaks in 1 or Peaky and Spike, which is basically an isosceles triangle with 2 tall triangles, right angle triangles next to them. I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can make this block today. One of them is with the V-block tool by Deb Tucker. One of them uses the Creative Grids 2 peaks in 1 triangle. And the other way I'm going to show you is using just any standard triangle. I'm going to use my 4.5 inch because we're going to make 4-inch finished size blocks. This is a very versatile block. It's used in many quilts, such as the tumbling triangles by Running with Scissors quilters. That's a great pattern. It also was used in the Galaxy quilt, which is by Deb Tucker. And there are many, many other quilts that have stars with these kind of spikes in them. Lots of quilts you'll find patterns that have this, and there are many ways to make it. First up, I'll show you the Deb Tucker V-block tool. If you take a look at the ruler, you'll see there are places for cutting and for trimming up the block. This block is made a little larger than it needs to be and then trimmed to the exact size. You need to know the finished size of your block for this one. And our finished size is actually going to be a 4-inch block that I'm making today. And it says 4-inch unfinished unit, cut 5-inch strips. Now a 4-inch finished unit, when you make the single unit, will be 4.5 by 4.5 because it allows for the seam allowance in the block. So make sure you know what it's going to finish at after it's sewn in and what it's going to be when you make it. So this one we're going to use 4-inch finished unit and cut 5-inch strips. So our strips are cut to 5-inch, our finished unit is 4-inch. Now if you look on your ruler, there says fold line for center triangle, cut line for side triangle. You need to know those. Now my center triangle in this unit is pink, and my side triangles are the purple batik that I have on there. So first I'll show you how to cut your center triangle. To cut your center triangle, you're going to put a fold in the end of your fabric for your first cut. And it says fold line for center triangles right on the ruler. So you'll line up that dotted line on your fold line. And this was my 5-inch strip. So it's going to line up along the 4-inch finished unit 5-inch strip line. And your first cut, you will simply cut right there, and you can slide that away, and you will make a triangle that looks like that. This piece on the end you will not need. Take that away. And after you make your first cut, you'll see your ruler doesn't line up. So what you have to do as you're doing it is flip your fabric over. And now you'll see there's a line over here. It says center triangle trim line. That one's going to line up on the edge of your fabric after the first one. The first one you fold, and then after that, every one is going to just be cut, lined up to that triangle line. And you can cut your next one. And then just like the first one, you would flip your fabric over and line up the next one, and you could cut as many as you need. Then to cut your side triangles, I have my purple fabric. And that one, if you go on here, it says cut line for side triangles, and it's a dark bold line on the ruler. It's still a 5-inch strip. And I'm going to put that bold line on there, and that actually adds the extra for the seam allowance that you need. And we line that up on the cut edge. I have it folded in half. We want 2 triangles to make this block, and they're opposite of each other. So fold your fabric and layer it so it's right sides together or wrong sides together. I'm using a batik, which kind of makes me cheating a little bit because it doesn't matter on mine as long as they're 2 together. But fold it in half, use right sides together or wrong sides together so your fabric makes 2 at a time, 1 left and 1 right. And then put a cut right in there, and you will make your 2 side triangles. And you can see right there that these are our 3 pieces that you need for the unit. Once you have your pieces cut, you're going to bring them to your sewing machine, and you're going to line up. And on the Deb Tucker V-block ruler, they line up from point to point. There's a flat edge on the end here, but the tip will end tip to tip. And you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam and sew your side on. After you sew it on, you will open up your seam and press it towards the small triangle on the side triangle. Then you go back to your sewing machine and you'll be able to line up the second side. Make sure you line it up and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. These blocks are larger than they need to be, so you'll have room to trim. So if your seam allowance isn't perfect, you actually have a lot of room here. And then you'll press that seam towards the small triangle. Like that. And you'll see you have more than a 1/4 inch above it, and you have plenty of room for trimming, so we're going to go over and trim it. When you're ready to trim your blocks, look carefully at the ruler. You'll notice it says finished size along this diagonal and cut size along the outside. These are the cut size measurements. Now our cut size is going to be 4.5 and our finished size is going to be 4 because of the seam allowance. So that finished size 4 is what we're going to line up the point at of our block. So if I put this right on my block, you can see right here the 4, finished size 4 is going to line up right at the point of my triangle, and then I shift it so the lines line up with the sides of my triangle. So then we're going to cut the 2 sides that are showing on the edges of the ruler. Okay. After you cut those 2 sides, you're going to rotate your ruler around and you're going to use the cut sizes 4.5 by 4.5, 4.5 here, 4.5 here, and we'll trim the other sides. And you'll notice at the top of the ruler there are these X's, dark X's, and my peak should line up with that X because that is where our seam allowance is given to us. So we'll line that up, hold the ruler secure so it doesn't shift, and we'll trim one side and trim the top. A little bulky in the middle. And that is the Deb Tucker V-block block. Now I'm going to show you how to use the Creative Grids 2 Peaks in 1 ruler. If you look at the Creative Grids ruler, you'll notice that the white numbers on this size tell you your cut size, fabric width, and the black numbers on this side tell you your finished size. Just like we did on the other ruler, we're going to use the 4.5 inch cut size and a 4 inch finished size. 4.5 inch strip gives you a 4 inch block. So that's what I'm going to use here. So I have a 4.5 inch strip of fabric here, and I'm going to lie this ruler, place your ruler right on there so that line, your top lines up with the top, and your 4.5 inch strip, 4 inch finished size line lines up. And then the first cut, you have to cut both sides. So I'm just going to cut here, and then you come around and cut the other side, and those are your scraps. You can slide away that piece, and then you just rotate your ruler around, and you can cut from this side to your next triangle. And you can continue until you have all the triangles you need across your block. Then you will pull out your side fabric, and you're going to use a 4.5 inch strip just like you did for the first one. Trim off your selvages at the beginning. Because you don't want the selvage end in your block, so trim that right off like that. And then the opposite side of the ruler, the first side was the center, the opposite side's your outside triangles. Layer your fabric, so you're cutting through 2 layers. If you have it right sides together, it will cut one of each direction when you cut them. And just like the other side, 4.5 inch strip makes a 4 inch finished block. So you start like this, and you'll trim the side. Now, if you look very closely, you'll notice right here there's a notch, and you want to trim that because that'll help you line up your pieces later. You're going to trim off this little notch at the beginning. And then you're also going to slide your ruler to the baseline, and you line up your cut edge and you line up the baseline, and it will make another little notch at the bottom. And again, that will help you line up your block perfectly. So if you take your tall triangle and a small one on each side and put them like that, when you're ready to sew them, those notches will line up with your triangle. It lines up with the point right here, and it lines up down here. So those are all cut and ready to sew. When you're using the Creative Grid rulers to cut your pieces, it is not having you make it larger and trim them to the right size. This is going to be sewn and will be finished at 4.5 inches. So having those notches that we cut are important for keeping it lined up and just the right size in the end. So make sure you take the time to cut those notches and line up your block point to flat side so it lines right up. Then bring it under your machine, and an accurate 1/4 inch seam is important on this one. So make sure you line it up carefully. And stitch it right down. Then you'll bring it to the iron and press it towards the outside side triangle. And then you're ready to sew your other side. Take the time, line up the flat part on the bottom, line up your whole side, and it lines up at the top. I don't like to start at the end with all that extra bulk. I start down at the bottom end, so it's not going to get caught up on my feed dogs. And then you press your second side seam. And that block is finished. It's 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. You don't need to trim it down. It is ready to go. If you don't have a specialty ruler, you can use your standard rulers to make this V-block. And the way I wrote it in the Colchester Mill Marvelous Mystery Pattern is for if you do not have a specialty ruler. And I'm going to show you how to do that way right now. In order to make that one, you're going to cut a 4.5 inch square, that is the center triangle, and you're going to cut 2 rectangles that will be your side triangles. You're going to have to do a little marking and measuring. So I want to measure a 1/4 inch from the edge of my block, and that would be right here. And then I want to mark the center point. So this is a 4.5 inch square. So half of 4.5 is 2 1/4. So my center point is going to be right here. And I'm just going to draw a line at a 1/4 inch, and I can go 2 1/4 inches this way. And I'm going to mark a little line up there by the seam allowance. So I made a little cross right there. That part right there is where I want my V triangle point to be. So we're going to mark where I'm on the wrong side of my fabric, and I'm going to mark a line from the bottom corner through that point all the way across to the other end. So I'm going to make a line like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to start at my point, go through that marked point that I made with the plus, the cross, and then draw that line. These 2 lines are going to be my sewing lines. I'm going to sew on the lines with my other pieces, and we'll trim it to the right size. So I'm at my sewing machine with my square and 2 rectangles. My square is marked, and I have my rectangle. You're going to sew by placing your rectangle underneath the triangle. And if you hold it up to the light, you can see the seam allowance is past the triangle. I have it about a 1/4 inch past it, and there's plenty of extra fabric in there. You're going to have plenty to work with. So now I'm just going to sew on my line. If you wanted to use just a slight bit to the outside of your line, you can. That just makes up for the thickness of the thread and the fabric when you're pressing it. It's not crucial because we are going to make this extra big and trim it down. I'm going to trim that one, and I'm going to bring it to my ironing board, and we're still pressing towards the outside triangle, and you'll see that outside triangle is going to go beyond the square. It's plenty big, so you have a little room to wiggle with. Now we'll do the other side. My line that's marked is there. This is going to go underneath it, and you want it under the triangle, and about 1/4 inch of it past the line. And just like the other one, I like to sew from the pointy towards this bulk so I don't have to go through that bulk first and get stuck. And now I'm just going to sew on the line. And we'll press that towards the extra side triangle. And you'll see it makes an unusual shape because it is not the right shape. We added rectangles instead of triangles. So we're going to have to go to our cutting table and make this perfect. Now I have a 4.5 inch square, so I can trim it by using my 4.5 inch square. If you don't have a 4.5 inch square, use whatever size square you have, and you can line up and cut 2 sides at a time. I'm lining up on the pink on mine, the big triangle fabric, the big square. 4.5 here, 4.5 here. And you can trim 2 sides like that. Or if you have a 4.5 inch square, you can place that on there and line it up, and you can trim all the sides at once to trim it. Your goal is to make it fit in a 4.5 inch square. Now if you look at the front, it looks just like our V block. The one thing you are going to have to do after that is you want to open this up and trim away the extra pink underneath. It's bulky and you don't need it in there. This one is sewn in, so just be careful not to cut any of your side triangle fabric. Trim away the extra, even with the side triangle fabric. So there you have it. Different ways to make the same exact block. Choose the one that works best for you. If you already have a ruler, use it. If you don't have a ruler, you can make your blocks without a ruler, and you can use them in so many different ways. If we put them all together, you can add some squares and make yourself a really cool star block. There's so many things you can do with it. Have fun. Thank you.